This is Module 1B of our course HRS 314. And before we go into the details of this module, I'd like to quickly go back on some of the things that we discussed in Module 1A just to refresh our memories, refresh our minds. Now, in Module 1A, we tried to create a foundation to understand the balance of power in Europe and the background to the unification of Germany. And there were certain key things that we outlined that you must remember in order to be able to follow as we continue with this next model. Number one, we established the fact that Germany was not unified as at 1860. Germany was not unified, and France was a republic, had been a republic and then an empire following the Franco-Prussian, following the Napoleonic Wars after the French Revolution in 1789. And subsequently, France became the major power in Europe. France became the more or less like a hegemon in Central Europe. And other powers, other great powers in Europe like Britain, Russia, were also present, and there was a sort of balance after the Congress of Vienna in 1814 and 1815. The powers of conservatism had been able to regress some of the advances that Napoleon Bonaparte had been able to gain with regards to republicanism. They had been able to restore, to some extent, monarchical systems of government all over Europe. So at this point in time, the forces of conservatism were back in force. But in the midst of Central Europe, Germany, or the Germanic states, so to speak, because they were not Germany at that point in time, were still not unified. They were a collect of principalities, of duchies, of city states, but they were not unified. And remember, in Module 1, in Module 1A, we were able to establish the fact that some of the key things that Napoleon accomplished within the German principalities was unifying the over 300 principalities into 39 Germanic states. So this had enabled the background towards the unification of Germany later on, because all these other 300 principalities would have been very difficult to bring them together. But the fact that Napoleon, during his reign, had been able to bring together the over 300 Germanic principalities into 39, it created an enabling environment. It created a good foundation for what was going to subsequently take place, starting from around 1862 upwards. So what we established was the fact that at this point in time, in 1862, Kaiser Wilhelm the first of Prussia had, certain challenges with the German, with the Prussian Reichstag. So he had been finding it difficult to get them to approve some of his. Now, the problems that Kaiser Wilhelm the First had been facing, with the Prussian parliament became so challenging that he was almost at the verge of, abdicating the throne. However, the turning point in Prussian politics, at least for William the First, Kaiser William the First, as King William the First, came when he appointed uh, Prince Otto von Bismarck, okay, as the German Chancellor. Now, this is a very, very serious development in the unification of Germany, because Bismarck is perceived as the father of modern Germany. Bismarck is the one that was able to put together all the forces that enabled Germany to become unified. Now, in our first model, Model 1A, we're able to look at some of the key things that Bismarck put in place in order to bring together all the scattered Germanic states and create a unified Germany. And just to remind us, remember clearly that we established the fact that Bismarck was a German nationalist. Okay, now apart from being a German nationalist, he was also a Prussian patriot. He was patriotic to Prussia as one of the Germanic states, but he was a German nationalist. He was somebody that desired above all things to see the unification of Germany. Because if you look at Europe at this point in time, you discover that while France, right here, was a republic, and we had the Russian Empire on the other hand, and then we have the Austro-Hungarian Empire on this side, and on the other, closer to the North Sea, we had the British Empire. But if you look at Germany here, you discover that Germany was not a state. We had Germanic states, city-states, principalities, duchies, so on and so forth. But Germany was not a state of its own. But we understood in our first model that Prince Otto von Bismarck was somebody that had a very, very profound military background, and he was very proud of Germany's history, especially in regard to the Holy Roman Empire, and he desired that Germany should become a nation of its own and a power in Central Europe. But we also established the fact that in attempting to create Germany, in attempting to unify all the Germanic states into one nation, there were certain challenges that stood before Bismarck. One of the key challenges was the fact that the balance of power in Europe at this point in time would not allow Germany, okay, to be unified in Central Europe, because France here wanted to remain as the major power. And the fact that France wanted to remain as major power was one of the key factors that stood, so to speak, stood against the unification of Germany. And also, another key factor that we established in our first model was the fact that all the individual principalities, the individual city-states in Germany, like you see here, we have Prussia, and we have Austria, we have Bavaria, we had Baden, we had Hanover, so on and so forth. Each of these individual city-states would have wanted their own independence. So the independence of the individual Germanic city-states would have been one of the key problems, against the unification of Germany. Apart from the fact that France, number one, would not want the unification of Germany because it will upset its power in Central Europe. If there's another big, powerful republic that comes up, it will challenge the power of France, therefore, upsetting the balance of power in Central Europe. So France, number one, would not want the unification of Germany, and number two, the various power plays among the kings, the princes of the various city-states, Germanic city-states, was also another key factor that would stand against the unification of Germany. Now, these were very two important factors that militated against the unification of Germany. Number three was the fact that in order for Germany to be unified, there has to be a leader within the Germanic city-states that wanted the unification of Germany. Now, this was not the case because at this point in time, Austria was the most powerful among the Germanic city-states, and Austria was not necessarily looking forward towards the unification of Germany. So this was a problem for the unification of Germany because Prussia, on the other hand, was looking towards the unification of Germany, but Austria, which was the most powerful of the Germanic city-states, and duchies or principalities, was not really looking towards that kind of vision. So these were the initial challenges towards the unification of Germany. So at the point in time when Bismarck became chancellor, was made chancellor of the state of Prussia by Kaiser Wilhelm I, Bismarck had, above all things, the ambition to unify these city-states and these principalities and duchies into one republic, into a German empire, so to speak. And he, looking at these various challenges that stood before the unification of Germany, it was obvious to Prince Otto von Bismarck that the only way that Germany would be unified was going to be through war and diplomacy. It's going to be through a balance of war and diplomacy. And in our first model in looking or discussing this topic, the unification of Germany, we discovered that Bismarck was able to implement various strategies that enabled him, one to move one step closer towards the unification of Germany. First of all, we saw that in attempting to use war and diplomacy in the unification of Germany, Bismarck did certain things which I may not go into the details now, since the details are in the first module. That first of all, he was able to create an alliance system between Prussia and the state of Russia. You see Russia right here. And we discovered that the Russian Empire, as at this time, Bismarck was able to create very strong diplomatic relations with Russia using the 1863 Polish revolt, as an excuse to create very good ties between Prussia and Russia. And this was very important because in the event of war with either Austria or France, Bismarck in Prussia was depending on the friendship of Russia. Now, in essence, he created this alliance by quelling down the revolt of the Poles who were under the Russian Empire. After they had revolted, and it was difficult for the Russians to mobilize all the way from Moscow and come down to the edge of the Russian Empire and stop this revolt. Bismarck rose up within a very close proximity with the Poles and crushed this revolt on behalf of the Russians, thereby creating diplomatic friendship. So he used both a war and diplomacy under these circumstances in order to create some very good diplomatic relations with Russia. This was diplomatic, should we say, cartridge, diplomatic, this was diplomatic ammunition that he was going to use subsequently later on in his attempt to unify Germany. Now, we went on also to see some other strategies that Bismarck put in place in order to help him move closer towards unifying the Germanic states. The second thing that we saw moving on from 1863 was the Danish War of 1864, and we saw what provoked this war, which was the Schleswig and Holstein affair. We may not go into details about the Schleswig and Holstein affair, but however, if you remember clearly, I established the fact that the Danish, right here on your map, you can see Denmark there, and you can also see Schleswig and Holstein right here. These were duchies that were very close to Denmark, and the Danish king at that point in time conducted a referendum in an attempt to incorporate Holstein and Schleswig into the state of Denmark. And it created an uproar within the Germanic states, especially within Holstein and Schleswig, because a very good percentage of the population there were Germans, and they wouldn't want to become part of Denmark. So Bismarck used this particular incident to create support for himself, for the state of Prussia, or to create some form of leadership for Prussia within the Germanic Zollverein, within the Germanic Confederation, the Confederation of Germanic States, because he quickly came to the rescue of Holstein and Schleswig in what was later known as the Danish War. They fought with Denmark, defeated Denmark, and brought back, Holstein and Schleswig back into the Germanic Zollverein. And then subsequently, I also discussed another strategy that Bismarck used in provoking war between Austria right here and Prussia, because he had envisaged that any attempt by Prussia to take leadership within the Germanic sovereign will be resisted by Prussia. And Prussia did not have any form of nationalist ambitions, did not have any form, Austria did not have any form of nationalist ambitions to bring together the Germanic states into unified Germany. So it was very important for Bismarck as a diplomat to create a situation whereby Prussia was seen in leadership position within the Germanic sovereign. So Bismarck provoked war between Prussia and Austria, and this subsequently resulted into the Austro-Prussian War of 1866, which we discussed in the first module, and that war resulted into defeat of the Austrians. And also, if you remember clearly, I noted the fact that we should pay attention to Bismarck's play of diplomacy during the Austro-Prussian War, because after the defeat of Austria, Bismarck insisted that there was no attempt to disgrace Austria in that process. The Prussian army did not march, into Munich and disgrace the Austrian Empire, but rather he played a diplomatic card by giving them the impression that, well, this was a dispute between German brothers, and created a platform on which Austria would later continue to be friends with Prussia. And this was very important to Bismarck, because once he continued to gain the goodwill and the friendship of Austria, he had an ally that would help him fight France right here later on, because he was going to use war, he was going to provoke war between Austria and France, between Prussia and France, in order to knock out France as an opposing force to the unification of Germany. Because we clearly established the fact that France will always resist any attempt at all for the Germanic states to come together, unify, and become a single nation. So subsequently, after the defeat of Austria, Bismarck now began to prepare himself towards conflict, imminent conflict with France. Now, all of that